right, what's up, everybody? It's your girl, Madam President, and I am so excited because we have the king himself on today's show, Mr. Ash Cash, Mr. Abundance, Mr. From the Block to the Bank. Okay, I am so excited about this because there is no other. First of all, I just want to say that I wanted to get with this brother. And before I could even get with him, he said, look, I got to take my daughter to school. So give it up for the brothers who are taking care of their families. Like, I mean, come on, you got to make noise when that happens, okay? You got to give that a round of applause, drop bombs, in the community. But before we go any further, before I bring my brother on, I just want to say a really quick prayer. Heavenly Father, thank you so much for allowing us to have this segment. Thank you so much for allowing today to be the day that you allow us to see another day. We thank you for your mercy. We thank you for your grace. We thank you for your love. We just ask that you give us the power and the strength to be more like you. Give us the peace that is required to move throughout the day. In your name we pray. Amen. All right, I'm bringing my brother on, Mr. Ash Cash.
Hey, I appreciate you. Thank you so much for having me. It's such an honor to be here with you. I appreciate you.
No, I appreciate you. And I just want to say, it's you. I can't have no regular talking. I only got you for not too long, but it's like, I just want to get into like, who is Mr. Ash Cash? And just number one, just the wealthy mindset that you have. I got an opportunity to see you at the All Black National Convention. And every time you get going. It's like you're sprinting,
I'm a kid from Harlem. I'm a kid from Harlem. I grew up in low income environment, St. Nicholas projects. And from an early age of 8 years old, I just knew that abundance, right? I wear this shirt all the time, right? Abundance is your birthright. And I knew that early on. And so, I grew up low income, single parent homes, same, similar story to people who grew up in a low income environment. Through the grace of God, I've had a great career. So I dodged a lot of troubles that normal people growing up in the hood do. But I'm a 15-year banking executive, and so I wound up having a great career as a banker. I started when I was 19 years old. Did everything in banking from teller to personal banker, private banker, branch manager, CEO of a credit union. Actually, one of the youngest CEOs of a federally chartered bank. Retired from banking in my early 30s. Decided to, in the words of the Honorable Sean Carter, Jay-Z, there's much bigger issues in the world I know, but I first had to take care of the world I know. And so I retired from banking to become a financial educator. And so I wrote my first book in 2009. Since then I've written over 17 books. I've sold close to 250,000 books as an independent publisher, just teaching people how to change their mindset to manage their money. I'm a media personality, if you will. So I've been on television, all media outlets, but I also have a really popular podcast called Inside the Vault with Ash Cash. And I think ultimately my goal is to teach our people how to change our mindsets to live in abundance now, not this pie in the sky, struggle now. And then later your rewards will come. The good book says on earth as it is in heaven. And my interpretation on that is not like, you're going to struggle here, because if you ain't going to struggle in heaven, well, you ain't supposed to struggle here, right? Because on earth as it is in heaven. And so that's where the saying abundance is your birthright is that, God has made us a promise to live abundantly now. And so I just kind of use what I know from a physical standpoint, from a mental standpoint, from a spiritual standpoint, put that all together so we can really learn how to, use what God gave us to live the abundant life that's promised to us.
Wow, that's a beautiful thing. And thank you so much for just rolling out all the things that you've done and all the things that you are, but I did not know that you were into banking previously, so that's always it's a good
from the block to the bank. You know what I'm saying? From the block to the bank.
Exactly. But, the one question that I want to ask you is, what are some cultural differences that you've noticed between, some of the environment, some of the people, and how you grew up low income? I grew up in the inner city of Chicago, so I understand those environmental differences. And from, growing up in the inner city of Chicago to working in the Hollywood. I worked in the Hollywood industry for a decade, and I noticed and seen so much, even in walking into that abundant mindset.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, one of the things I like to say is something that we use, and I try not to use this terminology too often, but we go around saying, you know, oh, we broke. Yeah. How that's a, you know, the definition of cursing yourself is the constant repetition of something over yourself, you know, over someone else. When you are people, you know, our grandparents used to say, oh, that's a curse word. You know, they would say damn or shit or some other derogatory term. It was like, oh, that's a bad word. But the bad words are the words that we are speaking over ourselves unconsciously.
Big facts.
Saying that you're broke 24/7, saying that you broke. You know, that is, I believe, some of the things that prevented us from having access to wealth. Walking around saying you broke, but you're not realizing that you got money in your pocket, even if it's for the groceries, even if it's for other things, you have money. And I realized too, I have a friend who's a Jewish woman, and she retired, you know, some years ago. And I asked her, I said, well, what made you retire now? Because she's healthy. And she says, well, the accountant said that I had enough money to live. Me and my husband, we had enough money to live until we were in our hundreds comfortably. And she said that included travel, emergencies, as well as things for the gifts for the children. I said, baby, what? Give me the sauce, give me the juice. Because I look at my grandparents, and you know, the income is just completely different. You know, bless my grandmother, she's no longer here, but my grandfather. And I just was like, what is the difference between her and my grandparents? And I thought about that, and I thought the difference was the accountant, having a family accountant, already having an understanding of from a group economic standpoint. So my question back to you, Cash, is exactly what are some of the fundamental differences that you saw from the community in which you grew up until you got into banking? What was the difference?
Yeah, I think the biggest difference, and I know a lot of people use this, they say mindset, but it is the biggest difference, right? In our community, in a low income community, we believe, right? We have a fundamental belief that we need to work hard for money. In a wealthy community, there is a fundamental belief that money needs to work hard for you. That little but big difference is the difference between believing that you're broke and the difference between knowing that abundance is all around you, right? And so what do I mean by that? In our community, you know, I noticed growing up, right? Go to school, get a good job, pay your bills on time, like all of these things that literally liquidate money out of your account, right? Save money, right? Go to school, work hard, save your money, retire later, right? When in the wealthy community, there's a difference. It's like, all right, the wealthy community does not work in order to save money or to pay bills. The wealthy community says, okay, if I don't have money right now, yes, I'm going to work to obtain that money, but I'm going to use that money to invest in income producing assets. And those income producing assets are the things that are going to fund my day-to-day living, fund my lifestyle, fund my vacation, fund everything, right? And so that was the stark difference. And once I realized that, right, it was no longer about, trying to live the American dream. That was the lie that they sold us, right? Which is the lie of, using all of your money, right? Become this middle class family where you're making six figures, and now you can take your trips to Martha's Vineyard and do all that stuff. No, the truth of the matter is, and my wife and I did this. Our first home, we didn't buy our first home where it was a single family home. We bought our first home, which was a multifamily. Why does that even matter? Because guess what? That multifamily, number one, that equity that we're gaining in the house. But number two, if we find the right tenant, that tenant pays our mortgage. And so the money we would have been paying for, for living expenses could potentially go into the stock market. It could go to our businesses. It could go to other things that also gives us, income. And then we use that income without, getting rid of our assets in order to fund our lifestyle. So I think that fundamentally, once I learned that that's what wealthy people did, that they like if you really understand the preservation of money, the preservation of wealth, how it's all about, it's not just about making money, right? There's 3 steps in wealth building. There's making money, there's managing money, but then there's this important piece that we forget. It's multiplying money. How do you multiply money? How do you turn that dollar into $100, 100 into 1,000, 1,000 to I was gonna say a canvas, but how do you multiply that money? And that's the big difference that I learned.
Oh, that's something that I didn't know that my mindset was messed up surrounding money until I started understanding that people think the poverty mindset is the kind of mind that, they think welfare, they think, this mindset of, just wastefulness. Mm-hmm. But I realized that sometimes the poverty mindset is this fear mongering of fear too, always in survival mode, always trying to just basically thinking you got to rob Peter to pay Paul. That's poverty mindset. Keeping up with the Joneses, believe it or not, that's a poverty mindset because you should be keeping up with somebody else's lifestyle, somebody else's everything. And I believe that people don't talk about the emotional aspect of it all, the community that you live around. So a culture in the housewives culture, it is for, I would like to say, consumerism and consumption. Yeah. A lot of times you'll see like in this dialect, and I'm not trying to be critical, but there's something that I noticed because as women, we have a different, flow of how we handle money than men. But it's like the dialect of, oh, you got the latest bag, the dialect of, you got the bigger house. And that is not the dialect of the true wealthy. The true wealthy, they live in the wealth.
Yeah. It's funny you say that because that was one of the biggest things I realized as a banker, because a lot of my positions were in management positions where, people would come into the bank and I knew what balances they had. I knew, what things were like overdrawn and things of that nature. And, not saying that there aren't a small minority of wealthy people who love to buy things, right? So there are a minority of wealthy people who love to get the bags, who love to show their wealth, who have the fur coats and all that other stuff. But the majority do not wear their wealth on them, right? The majority of them, like I remember having a client, it was a couple, and they were very modest looking. They went to thrift shops, like their shirts were, like the clothes that they wore. There's nothing in your mind that would tell you that this is a wealthy couple. But when they came into the bank, they had $2 million in a savings account, which told me, if I understand the wealth game, is like what do they got in their Charles Schwab account? What are they having, right? Because understanding that was just their liquid money, right? And this wasn't just one isolated instance. This is a lot of instances where I saw wealthy people who really had assets and own things didn't really wear their money on them. But on the flip side, there were people that would come into the bank that you would look at, right? If you were somebody who judged a book by its cover, you would look at somebody and you would see the fur coat, or you would see the Louis Vuitton, or you would see all of these things. But these are the same people that were in my office asking for, they had a low balance, or they were living paycheck to paycheck. Yes, they probably, were making a lot of money, but at the end of the day, they were so stretched out. They were in debt. They were, if one mistake and an overdraft comes and they're in my office crying, asking if I could refund them the fees because it's going to mess up all these other things. And so you're absolutely right. There is this culture, especially now with social media, where people are vying. They don't even care about reality anymore. People are vying for the likes. People are vying for the shares, and the things that give them the likes and the shares is this pretentious thing, as if what I have on, how big my house is, all of these things that I can show online is gonna show or give people who really don't matter this presumption that you're rich, when rich people know who really got it or not. And so there is that, but that's one of the things I learned, is that true wealth is freedom. True wealth doesn't have to portray itself. True wealth just is.
Exactly. So I got a question for you. If someone was deep into debt and making about $40,000 a year and feeling hopeless, what's the first step you would basically advise them to take right now?
Yeah. So I would say know your numbers, number one, right? Create a plan, because a lot of times, we talk about emotions, right? There's an emotional aspect that comes with being in debt. This is emotional feeling of hopelessness that happens. But the truth of the matter is that if you are deep in debt, it's all about just creating a plan, right? Asking yourself, all right, yes, I want to tackle, and this is just, some people might say, oh, tackle the debt first. Make sure you get rid of your debt and then start the process of rebuilding. We have a saying in my abundance community that says, and is better than or, right? Yes. Abundance means that you don't have to choose. You can do both at the same time. And so what I would say is come up with a plan. Come up with a plan where you are strategically looking at your debt and figuring out ways to get rid of the debt. But the other piece of it, I would say immediately, you have to start feeling abundant, right? And so what does that mean? That means that start with creating a percentage of money that comes in that you're going to save, right? Because we should all have 6 to 8 months of expenses in an account ready, right? I life and death is in the power of the tongue. So I don't call it an emergency fund, because I'm not trying to call emergencies into my life. And so I call it a financial freedom fund, right? Okay. Because that's what my desire is financial freedom. And so I'm going to take 10%, 20%. I'm going to take a certain percentage of money that comes in, and I'm going to put that away into a financial freedom fund with the goal of having at least 6 to 8 months of expenses in an account. Why is that liberating if you're somebody who has debt? Number one, because I'm a big fan of Abraham Hicks, and Abraham Hicks talks about being able to spend money in your mind, right? Mm-hmm. I do it all the time, right? Where I look at an account of mine and I see I have money in it. It's freeing. I don't have to buy the Louis bag, because I can buy it in my mind. I can say, oh, I could afford the Louis, I just don't want it. Oh, I could buy the G-Wagon, but I don't want it. I could, right? And so think about mentally. You're being able to buy things mentally without having to really spend the money. So number one, it's so freeing, because as you start saving money, now you start saying to yourself, man, if I wanted to go out, I could. If I wanted to have a trip, I could. You don't feel hopeless. You don't feel like, oh my God, I can't do this because of my circumstance, which actually forces you to make other stupid, impulsive decisions, because you're operating out of lack and not of abundance, right? So that's number one. Number two, in that same breath, I would also start to put a certain percentage aside to start to invest money, right? And so whether you invest in stock market, but whatever it is, you need to be figuring out a way to invest your money so that money grows, right? And again, when I talk about 10%, 20%, the first thing people are going to say, well, I'm living paycheck to paycheck right now. So where do you expect this money to come from? Well, I say treat yourself like FICA, right? I don't know who she is. I don't know who FICA is. I don't know why she gets her money first. But I know when I worked a 9 to 5 and I worked my butt off, whether it was 80 hours, 60 hours, whatever hours I worked, the moment that I got my check, FICA, she took her money off the top. And guess what I did? I managed the rest. Whatever was left over, I figured it out. And so you need to stop letting FICA get all of your money and treat yourself like FICA, where take it off the top. Immediately take that 10% for emergency fund or your financial freedom fund. Take the other 10% for your investment. And I even say take it one step further and take 10% for spending, right? So that way you don't feel like you're deprived, right? That you're actually spending. So 30% of your income already off the top, take that away. So and then only budget that 70%. And I think that gives you, number one, a sense of hope now, right? Because now you're slowly creating an emergency fund or a financial freedom fund, so you have liquid money available. Number two, you're building investments, and so if you have the right investment strategy, that money is going to multiply itself. And then number three, you are treating yourself, so you're not working hard and delaying gratification, but you're able to work hard but still have your cake and eat it as well.
Absolutely. I love that. And, I just want to say that I realized too that culturally, there's a lot of shift that's happening. Like you said, social media. Social media is another big thing for consumerism. It's all about just adding up that debt.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? It's like, I like to tell people, my little cousin, we riding around, and she said, I can't wait to get my first car. I said, well, if it's not a cash card, that first goddamn car note can't wait to get you either. So we have to have that mindset. But it's something that I had wrote down. I said, we always talk about what rich people do. Is there any behavioral habits of the elders, the OGs, before banking was a big thing, that they have given us that you believe, we should hold on to?
Yeah, I think number one, when I think about the OGs, it was all about family. There was wealth was in the family, right? Mm-hmm. And what that means is, we were a supportive unit, right? And so we weren't quick to, kick out our kids when they turn 18, right? We weren't quick to automatically make them adults and have them take care of everything themselves, right? Think about our grandmothers back in the day. You had cousins, you had nieces, you had uncles, you had aunts, you had like 12, 15 people in a 3-bedroom apartment, right?
Yes, my grandmother did.
Right. And so think about that, right? Think about how people who are not born in this country, who come here and do the same thing, right? They follow that foundation of family. They allow family they support each other at the beginning stages, so that they get the right footing, and they, instead of using money to rent or using for separation, that money stays in the household, and then now the extra money goes into building a business, right? Think about the people who build hotels, or who own Dunkin' Donuts, or right, like all of these. It's called the spider web doctrine, right? Where you keep the family together and you support each other. And so I think that is the number one thing that we need to go back to, right? Because grandmothers now are still in the club, right? So grandmothers now, they can't wait to get their kids out of the house, right?
Right.
So now they're sending their kids off, right, to be able to, to party, or, so that they can live their life, not realizing that at 18 years old, kid, you don't really start figuring yourself out till like 26, 30, right?
Right.
26 and 30 years old. And so imagine if there wasn't a stigma of, oh, I'm an adult at 18, but there was this stigma saying, stay here as long as you need to, so you can get your stuff together, so we could break the generational curse. And I think so, I think back in the day, that was the one thing that we understood was all we have is us. People talk about integration all the time. But I truly believe that integration was the worst thing that happened to the Black community, because once we started to integrate, we started to now have a vision of being like them, thinking that they were better, when the truth of the matter is that we went further together. We have the talent, we have the resources, and if we stop the integration, what we could do is build our own. And when I say integration is the worst thing that happened, I'm not saying that we only sell to Black people. I'm saying that let's take care of ourselves first, right? Foremost, because what happens is there needs to be interdependence between, other cultures and other races and other things, right? Because what happens is if we become strong as a unit, now we have power. Now we have political power. Now we have economic power. And I feel like everything that's wrong with our community will be solved if we get back to unifying, if we get back to sticking together. And so that's the number one thing that I believe that the OGs taught us back in the day that we need to get back to.
I agree with you, and I just would like to add to that and say that when I was growing up, my grandmother, it was my grandmother, my grandfather, my mother, her two sisters, and my uncle. We all lived in a 3-bedroom apartment. So I like to tell people I don't come from a 2-parent household. I come from a 6. Everybody, could tag in and get me in order anytime they got ready. So I have a sense of community very early. But I also realized that the philosophy behind pushing everybody out, we pushing out our wealth. I think about the times where we all lived together and we all would come in the living room and watch the Bulls play their championship games, but we didn't come in the living room and talk about finances. Another thing that's happening with us is too, we all have this individual ways that we do as a family. It's like, oh, my sister got her business. Oh, Chanel got her business. Or, but it's like, no, we should be coming together, trying to figure out, well, what have you learned on that job that you work at? What have you learned on that job that you work at? And how would that, in some kind of way, how can we make that a family benefit? Because the one thing that I've noticed about the family is, when things are going good, we're not tapping into the family. Absolutely. But when it's going bad,
exactly.
Oh, let me get that $40.
Exactly. Let's take it a step further, right? Because I've studied. I'm a student of Powernomics. Fast shout to Dr. Claude Anderson. I've also studied the Rockefellers, right? And when you think about the Rockefeller Trust, I think that's something that we need to take heed into. Because imagine this, right? You can have multiple life insurance policies. Imagine if every family, right? If every family decided to open up a family trust, and every time, right? So the uncles, the aunts, the nieces, the nephews, every time somebody is born, right? Everybody has a life insurance policy, and that life insurance policy, the beneficiary of that is the trust, right? What happens, right? What happens when the natural happens, when we naturally, all of us are going to die? Now, we've now created our own bank, right? Now we have this trust, and it's funded by life insurance, right? And we have, whether it's $100,000, whether it's $1 million, whatever the amount is. Now, when cousin Ronnie wants to start a business, we have rules around the trust. We don't have to go beg and borrow from the bank and allow them to charge us these exorbitant fees in order for us to borrow money. We can go to the family trust, and the family trust is what's gonna, fund the business, and we pay the money back into the trust, right? Like there's so many advanced ways that if we just stay together as a family, there's simple things that we can do that we could build legacies and just like eradicate generational poverty. And so it's really about the knowledge. It's really about understanding these different things that wealthy people do. And I think that's the beauty and this is why, again, abundance is your birthright. You can have an abundance of abundance, or you can have an abundance of lack. Right. And what does that mean? That means you can sit here and complain about Donald Trump. You could complain about DEI. You could complain about all these things. But guess what? Guess what you could also do? You could also follow the moves of the people who are wealthy. Right. You could also look, right, the same companies that are cutting DEI. What? All right. First of all, if you understood who were the main benefactors of that, and who's going to keep supporting them. Like, if our support don't matter, right? I'm going to has a Target on his back. So let's use Target for an example. Right. If we look and we say, well, at the end of the day, Target doesn't care if we boycott them because we're not the majority people who buy from Target anyway, right? Yes, there's a small percentage of us who buy from Target, but if you look at the numbers, they don't care, right? So what if you said, you know what? All right, with DEI going away, there might be a majority of people who support those companies even more.
Mm-hmm.
Some people say boycott, but what if you learned and you were a stockholder in it? This may sound counter, but for me, I'm saying, all right, let me just look at the fundamentals of certain businesses. And if those businesses are going to do well, regardless, why can't I take advantage of that? Right. And so for me, I am not looking at anything that's happening in this world emotionally. I'm not looking at, again, I'm not looking at Donald Trump. I'm not looking at DEI. I'm not looking at plane crashes. I'm not looking at anything emotionally. Yes, right? Like my heart goes out if people lose their lives. Like, yes, there are there's a human side that's emotional. But at the same time, there is a business side. There is a side where we can look and we say, all right, what are the rich people doing? What are the wealthy people doing? Where are they investing? What, like, all right, Donald Trump is putting tariffs on Mexico and California or in Canada, and so how are these companies gonna do well? Are these companies gonna suffer? And this is probably getting in advance, but you start thinking about options, right? Do you want to put puts? Do you want to guarantee? Do you want to put bet against companies going down? Like, there's so many wealth strategies that if we just got out of our emotions and played the game the way they're playing, there is a massive wealth transfer that is happening right now. And I believe that we as a community, if we start educating ourselves more, we can be the main benefactors of this wealth transfer.
No, you're absolutely right. I totally agree. Dr. King said, I believe I collided, I united my people, I integrated my people into a burning house. That was because, also too, integration has the ability to decide who gets the what. And that's the difference between people who have built, and I said this too, as it relates to Target or any other enterprise that is struggling with DEI and all that other madness. But the reality is, I said that we really have to get into the mindset of why they have the stores and we have the shelves. Once we can start understanding why they have the stores and why we have the shelves, it changes everything. And again, I talked to a friend I love talking to the elders because they have so much wisdom. Yeah. And, you mix a little bit of that wisdom, you mix the creator's wisdom, and you mix a little, your own theology, your own thoughts, and you can really come up with something great. But something that I know for a fact is that, one of the things that got them the building is, besides the Jim Crow, besides the violence, it's the compliance, it's the consistent compliance. Well, this is what we do in this family.
Yeah.
This is how we behave. This is who you will marry. This is where you will live. We don't want to think about that because when everybody walk around talking about, I do what I want to do, but you don't. You don't do what you want to do. You do exactly what the system, tells you to do until, like you say, you get your money up and then you got the freedom to do what you want to do. And that's a different thing. I also look at our education system, how they consistently keep us deprived from the things that's going to get you into the money. Yeah. I realized when I was in high school, like I said before, I was taking a mass communication course. And in the mass communication course, we had began to learn how to do editing on different softwares. We had just got the Apple computers. This was like 2000, in one. Okay. So it was just like the beginning of it all. And so the funny and the interesting thing is it was fascinating to learn that, to learn the editing and all of that. And then my teacher and a senior in high school got into a physical altercation. Once they got into a physical altercation, the lab was shut down. We never went back in that lab for 2 years. So we graduated and we had to find different majors. I think about that. And the reason I think about that is because I got to work at Tyler Perry Studios. And when I was younger, when you worked inside of the studio, I met a guy who was an editor. And it reminded me of my, high school self. And I said, well, tell me about editing, and it was an older white guy. And he looked up at me because he was sitting down in the editing suite. And he looked up at me. He said, I've been doing this a long time. He was an older guy. He said, my neighbor, he said, I grew up in Hollywood, or California. He said, my neighbor worked on all the movies, Back to the Future and all of that. He said, I would go over to his house. He had this system. He said, I just would look at him, and pretty soon I started going over to his house to see my friend. I started going over to the house to see the dad and the computers. Yeah. And so all that to say that what we don't realize is what you do daily, you do well. That's it. That's all. What you do consistently, what you have an interest in, it shows. This man started playing on computers in editing. Now he sits in a editing studio for a living. Yeah. It is not by surprise. It is not your birthright to be a stripper. It is not your birthright to be the hustler. It is not your birthright to have the occupation that you got to exploit yourself and your body just to get some money. And, that's not your birthright. Your birthright is whatever the dream is, the creativity is, you can have an abundance of it too. Absolutely. So I'm with you, Ash. That's 100% for sure. But before you go, it's Black History Month. So I just want to ask you this question. If Black Wall Street would have never had, the catastrophe happen, if it was never burned down, what do you think it would be today?
I think Black Wall Street would have been the model for all of the different Black Wall Streets throughout the country. I think that we would have such a powerful economic base, not only here in America, though, right? I think that what would have happened was we proved the model. We would have proved our strength as a community, and so every state in America would have its own Black Wall Street, similar to how every Asian or Chinese neighborhood has a Chinatown. I think that would be the same thing for our community in every parts of the country. But then take it a step further, the favelas in Brazil, right? The Brazils of the world, the Cubas, all of the, places where there are, Africans, right? The Afro-Latinos, the Caribbeans, Africa. I think that there would be such a larger base. And we would be the economic power. And I honestly believe that's why it was burnt down, because they understand our power. Even today, right? When you think about words have power, right? We are always called the minority. But the truth of the matter is that as Africans throughout the world, we are the majority. And so that's why those who understand that will always try to act as if we are not superior, meaning that we are not the ones that have the power. And they want to make us seem weak and divide us, whether it's divide us through religion, divide us through ethnicity, divide us through skin color, however way they could use to divide us, they will, because they understand our power. And so, back to your question, if Black Wall Street was thriving today, we would be us as melanated people would be so powerful all around the world, and we would be the ones in control of the world economy and the resources and in what direction the world would be going into.
Absolutely. I always like to say, when I visit Vegas, I think of Black Wall Street. I just was like, this is just a money maker 24/7 and don't stop. I was just like, we would definitely, be this on times 10, because this is something that I don't know if you ever read this, but one of the pieces that I've read on Black Wall Street was the community was so powerful that if a woman was a widow and she didn't have a home, they would literally build her a home within a matter of weeks. She would have a home. Yeah. And that is profound to me, that the men say, well, if we got to build a home for a woman and children, then that's what we'll do. The kind of people that was associated to that movement is, just hardcore unmatched. Yeah. So first of all, thank you, Ash. Let the people know where they can find you.
Yep. You can go to my website, iamashcash.com. Everything is there, from, my books to my programs to any free resources I have. And you can also follow me on all social media platforms at iamashcash.
Absolutely. I would just like to say, you guys know I'm Madam President with a Z. This is where you come and get real news, bold truth. I am 100% politically incorrect. I'm so grateful to have Ash here. Just number one, he reminds me of my father. My father was killed when I was 10, but when I see men with your statue, when I see men, dark complected, bald head, it reminds me of my father so frequently. So thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate you. God bless you and your family. And of course, I follow you, and I will continue to make sure that the people know who the man is 24/7 for the culture, giving you guys just all the wealth. Follow him if you want to build wealth. He is one of the greater ones to do it. I'm Madam President. Thank you all for being here, and we'll see you next time.